Now switching gears, Oscar and Emmy-nominated filmmaker Matthew Heineman has a powerful new documentary out right now entitled Cartel Land. It's an on-the-ground look at two modern-day vigilante groups and their shared enemy, the murderous drug cartels in Mexico. This film, which Matthew directed, has been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, and Matthew joins me right now from New York. Congratulations on the Oscar nomination. Did you see that coming?
No, I was incredibly humbled and honored when I found out. Obviously you don't make films to get awards, but it was a wonderful recognition, and I'm incredibly excited about it. I'm especially excited that it'll help shed light on this issue, put a further spotlight on the issues raised in this film.
And so what did you intend to do when you set out on this journey? Did you hear about this story first? Did you want to do a film on the war on drugs? How did this all come together?
Yeah, I think there's been a ton of coverage of how the drug wars have failed, how policy has failed. This issue has also been glorified in movies and TV shows. And what I really wanted to do was sort of go to the source and see how this violence, see how these drug wars were affecting everyday people, put a face to this violence, and ultimately to see how everyday people were rising up to fight back, and then the ramifications of what happens when they did so.
I mean, the film looks absolutely incredible, and just so the audience has a sense of what we're talking about and can get in the mood, let's just take a look at a clip of Cartel Land right now. Okay, so how did you first find out about these vigilantes?
I was, my last film was a film called Escape Fire. It was about healthcare in the U.S. And I was sort of traveling around with the film. I was riding the subway in New York about a year after it came out. And I read this article about these vigilantes on the U.S. side of the Mexican border. Right when I read this article, I knew this was something I wanted to explore. And then my father actually sent me an article about the Autodefensas, a group of citizens fighting back against the Knights Templar cartel in the Mexican state of Michoacan. And right when I read this article, I knew I wanted to create this sort of parallel portrait of vigilantism on both sides of the border. I was on the phone with El Doctor, who is leading this group the next day, and 2 weeks later I was in Mexico filming.
I want to talk about a lot of other things, but I feel like I'm compelled to ask you, without giving away the ending, about this drive that people have of justness, of needing to take up arms if other people aren't protecting them, if our government's not protecting us. We're seeing this in the United States. Is that something that makes sense to you, in terms of morally, ethically, and even in effectiveness?
I think, one of the things that provoked me also to make this film was precisely what you're asking, is what drives men and women to take up arms? What provokes people to do such things? And obviously in this film, there's two sides to the story. There's, the Mexican side and the U.S. side. And at the heart of these two sides and these two movements are these two men. El Doctor, who's leading the group in Mexico, and Tim Naylor-Foley on the U.S. side. They're both 55 years old. They both believe that the government's failed them. They both have, quote unquote, taken the law into their own hands to fight for what they believe in. But the circumstances are quite different. In Mexico, the violence is visceral. It's real. 100,000 plus people killed since 2007. 25,000 plus people disappeared since 2007. Those are staggering numbers. Whereas in Arizona and in the U.S., we aren't seeing that level of violence. We aren't seeing that violence really even close to that. And so that fight on the U.S. side is much more of a theoretical fight. It's much more of a fear that these Mexican drug wars will seep their way across our border. And so for me, those dynamics of what provoked these different groups and the members of these different groups to take up arms was fascinating. And also the conflicting motivations within these groups, which ultimately on the Mexican side of the story is what leads to their downfall.
Switching gears for a second, let's talk about what happens when someone is taken down, like a drug lord, for example, El Chapo. I mean, does it help?
Again, I'm not a policy expert. I'm happy to talk about policy if you want to talk about policy, but that's not my expertise. That's not what I sought out to do. But from speaking to people and knowing obviously a little bit about this world, what seems to happen when you take out a drug lord like El Chapo or other heads of cartels is that nothing changes. That there's essentially often a fight for power within that organization. Sometimes they splinter and they fracture into different groups. Sometimes that leads to more violence. But what it doesn't change is the inevitable flow of drugs northward and the violence that comes with that. And so, this policy of trying to go after the heads of the cartels, like people like El Chapo, doesn't really, affect the larger issue and the larger problem. And Chapo said it himself in the Rolling Stone piece written by Sean Penn. If I'm gone, someone's just going to replace me.
What did you think about Sean Penn's journey? Did you think that was a good thing to do? Did that help bring light to the story the way you want to see it told?
I think what I've been disappointed by over the last couple of weeks since this story broke was the almost incredible obsession with the story, with Sean Penn, with El Chapo. That's not the story. The story is the suffering of the Mexican people. The story is 100,000 plus people being killed since 2007, 25,000 plus disappeared. The story is corruption at almost every level. The story is failure of government institutions on both sides. And that's what we should be talking about. That's what should be in the headlines, not the story of a Hollywood actor meeting with a drug lord.
Matthew, thank you so much for making this film. I encourage everybody to see it. It's such an important topic. Congratulations on the documentary and the nomination, Matthew. Cartel Land is now available on iTunes and most video-on-demand services.
Thank you so much.